Good evening, everyone. Now, hold on. This hasn't ticked over the time yet. If you can hear me, sorry. Just making sure that everyone can. Show me the time, you piece of shit. Show me the time. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the zoo. The minion with me this evening thus far is Donkey.
Good evening, one and all.
And hopefully we'll be joined by Adam and Inquisitor at some point. But thus far, neither of them have popped in.
Unfortunately.
So how are you doing today, Donkey?
Well, as we discussed before the stream, mixed bag. Football's got me frustrated. Gonna see my significant other in a couple of days, thankfully. And there was an incident in front of the store of a former boss and close friend of mine, ending in a 40-year-old male being transported to London, Ontario hospital with critical injuries.
Mm-hmm. And like we were saying beforehand, and I'll get to the... Should I do the pleasantries first and then go into the topic, or should we just go straight into the
pleasantries and then a summary of what we were talking about before?
Okay, so pleasantries, and as it is once again a Friday, I'm of course the keeper for this evening, Sanguine. I had a rather pleasant night, just had a fantastic dinner, and now I get to bullshit with people while finally home and in the comfort of my normal environment, which is nice. But now back to the topic. As we were talking about beforehand, you mentioned that one of your acquaintances, one of the people that you're rather like, is potentially taken off to the hospital, and you said that you felt bad because you're hoping that it was the other guy.
Not my close friend, and it was like his brother or co-worker or someone else.
Yeah. You're hoping that it was someone else, not the one that you're actually friendly with. And you said that you felt bad for saying that. And I said that the idea that everyone's equal, it should be everyone's equal before the law, but in no other way is everyone equal. No one's equal when it comes to applying for a job. You're going to have someone who's the best candidate. No one's going to be equal when it comes to how much you care about them or how much their life is worth to you. And I'm sick and tired of people trying to say, well, every life is equal. No, they aren't. You don't believe that every life is equal. No one believes that every life is equal. Because if they believe that every life was equal, then pick the biggest scumbag on earth that is still alive, and then ask that person if you had the choice to save your spouse or the scumbag, which one would you do? They will immediately respond that they'd save their spouse.
Yep.
But if every life is equal, Donkey, if you had the choice, you could either save yourself 5 $1 bills or a $5. You're going to lose one of them. You can only grab one. Which one are you going to grab? You'd be going the same thing.
Yeah.
Which one am I closer to?
Mm-hmm. It would depend on secondary factors between 5 singles and a $5.
Yeah. If they were actually equal, it would have that moment of how the fuck am I supposed to say? Even if they were close, like you give that same question and you make it their spouse or their child.
Fuck, I ain't making that call.
A lot of people will start to go, oh, fuck, shit. Because they actually are really close in value.
Mm-hmm.
The reason why everyone's able to go, oh, of course I'd save my spouse. Why the fuck would I save the serial rapist? is because no one thinks that the serial rapist is worth as much as their spouse.
Yeah. I mean, I hate to say it, but there's a lot of minions that come after Coulter for me.
Yeah. And that's to be expected. Your partner should be one of the highest, if not the highest, in your list.
Mm-hmm.
One of the other ones, that your children should be extremely high on the list. If you have children, they should be right up at the top. And when it comes down to, okay, who do you save? Your child A or child B? That should be a tough decision. Because they should be of effectively equal value to you.
Yeah,
But
unfortunately, even between children, there is a minor hierarchy. No parent wants to admit it, but there is.
There can be. There can also not be. It depends on the family and depends on the children. Because if one of your children is the obvious scumfuck of the kids, they're going to be below the one that's actually going to make something of themselves.
Mm-hmm.
If you have, it doesn't mean that you don't love that child. It doesn't mean that you don't care about that child. But if you have a child that is constant, just drug-addled haze, and you have another child that they're making something of themselves, they have a wife, they have a kid, so you're going to choose the successful child to save.
Unfortunately.
You feel like shit afterwards, but you're going to choose the successful child to save.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and of course, God forbid anyone has to make such a decision.
Oh yeah, it is a horrendous thing to have to make that decision. But I'm always slightly annoyed whenever I hear someone say that every life is equal. No, they aren't.
No, and for a more realistic example, buddy breaks into your house or is assailing you or someone close to you. Okay, I don't give a fucking shit about the guy. I want him to stop.
Yeah, and another good example is there's every time that someone dies when trying to rob someone else, there's at least a score of chuckle fucks that will say, no one's life is worth so little. No one's life is worth less than your belongings. No. They chose their life is worth less than my belongings. Who am I to argue?
Mm-hmm. I mean, sudden and acute failure of the victim selection process is a thing.
Yeah. If I say, this is my shit, I will protect my shit, and someone goes, I'm going to try to take your shit, it becomes okay, you've just chosen that your life is worth risking. I didn't make that decision for you. You made that decision. You die after that, as long as it isn't someone went out of their way to kill you. Like if you break into someone's house, they shoot you, you then run because you just got winged by the first shot, and they go sprinting down the road after you, and then execute you when you collapse.
Yeah, that sounds more like murder to me.
Yeah, that's murder. If you break into someone's house, their immediate response is they pull out a gun, they shoot you. That I have absolutely no problem with. That is, you made a poor decision. That poor decision cost you your life. No one else made that decision for you. Boo-hoo. And this is something that drives me crazy, like I said, because I just constantly hear, every life is equal. No, they aren't. Not every life is equal.
There's a hierarchy for every person, and it's a subjective hierarchy.
Yep, every person has a subjective hierarchy. Because if you know a person, they're going to be worth more than someone that you don't know. And if you don't know the person, but someone that you know knows them, they're going to be worth more to you than someone who you don't know, nor does anyone that you know.
Mm-hmm.
And the more this is also where it gets to. The more like you someone is, chances are the more you're going to end up caring about them. Also, the rarer a loss is, the more you're going to care about it. And these are two things that play into it, and it pisses me off every time that it's, well, this action just happened in insert small town in middle America, and everyone's pissed off about that, but no one talks about the hundreds of people that died in Chicago. Well, yeah, because the
Chicago gang violence is constant.
horrendous murder that just happened in small town was the first time that horrendous murder happened in small town in the past 150 years. Meanwhile, when you're talking about Chicago, there's a lot of people that die in Chicago every fucking year. Mm-hmm. That's not to say that their lives are worthless. That's not to say anything like that. But it is to say that you get fatigued. You can't care about every fucking death when it's someone's dying horrendously, constantly. Well, why do we care about terrorist attacks in Europe and in America, but we don't give a shit about them in the Middle East? Because they're almost constant in the Middle East.
Or, in this case, you see it more on the news more because it's rare, so you know about it more.
Yep. And it's going back to that idea of you get fatigued. If it's a constant drain, you get fatigued. If you tried to give a shit about every single person that died when it came to a violent death,
your empathy would burn out in maybe a month.
Less than that. If we're talking globally.
Yeah. You're not wrong.
Because there's people dying horrendously all over. Again, that's not to say that we should just be going, oh yeah, whatever. But it's going to be a different level of impact.
Hmm.
And it has to be a different level of impact. And again, it also plays into the more similar someone is to you, the more likely you're going to get affected by it. That's just part of human nature. If the person down the street who goes to the same grocery store as you, goes to the same bars as you go to, that you're familiar with, just you aren't like constantly around each other, so they aren't a friend, they're just someone that you know and that you're interacting with, their acquaintance.
Mm-hmm.
If they die horrendously, that's going to fuck you up a lot more than if you hear about someone halfway across the country.
Assuming that halfway across the country means of no relation.
Yeah. Halfway across the country.
The modern internet means you can know people from all over.
But you have no relation to them. You don't know them from Tom, Dick, or Harry.
Mm-hmm.
They're just Joe Schmo from Idaho.
Yeah, I'm just making sure that qualification is in.
And if you take that and you extend it out, the person who is from a town very similar to your town, but is miles away, is going to be more of an impact for you than someone who lives in the same exact sort, or in an entirely different sort of situation from you, miles out, as long as there isn't the burnout aspect. The more like someone is to you, the more it hits you when they die. And this isn't on a racial basis. That part doesn't matter because you can have damn near everything in common with someone of a different race than you,
Mm.
and almost nothing in common with someone of the same race.
I will argue that there is a point at which race becomes the primary determining factor, but at that point, there's next to nothing else.
Yeah. That's at the point where you hear someone died that had a name similar to yours.
Mm.
Chances are they're going to be of a similar race if they have a name similar to yours. And it'll be, oh my god, someone with my name died. That's the level of effect.
Yeah, once you get down this low, it's just...
Yeah, it just... People need to stop saying that every life is equal. Every life is equal before the law, or should be before the law. We aren't always good at that. We fail that a lot. But that should be where we attempt to go. That every life is equal before the law.
Mm-hmm.
But personally, no life is going to be entirely equal. It's going to be a very different balance of who's more important to you. And it's going to be constant. Every single person falls somewhere on that spectrum of from the person that you care about the most to the person that you care about the least. And the person that you care about the least will either be someone that you absolutely fucking hate that you know, or someone that you absolutely fucking hate who you don't know, but you know of their crimes.
Looking at you, politicians.
Or hearing about a serial killer, a chomo, a horrendous serial rapist, shit like that. They'll almost always be extremely low on people's list of how much do I care about this person.
Mm-hmm.
And they should be extremely low on that list.
Connected sort of back to football, I'm shocked by how one of my buddies from football Discord hates Deshaun Watson. And if you're aware of that name, 30 allegations, 4 of them made it to grand jury, but grand jury didn't indict, and 7 of them resulted in a 11-game suspension last year. Sexual nature. Mostly MotZ says that he was touching inappropriately.
Say again?
Sue says he was touching inappropriately is the primary allegation.
Okay. Has there been any information other than the allegation?
Like I said, it made it to 4 of the allegations last year made it to Houston grand jury. The grand jury did not indict. 11 or so made it through the league investigation, and that resulted in what started as a 6-game suspension, but the league and the Players Association agreed to 11 games, with which Watson has now served. And this guy from NFL Discord still friggin' hates the guy.
Oh, yeah. Because with sufficiently fucked up allegations,
31 total.
With a sufficient number and sufficiently fucked up, one allegation of crimes against children typically will completely turn everyone, and they should turn damn near everyone if they're valid. The problem is that
my issue there is if they're valid.
Yep,
a lot of people
don't wait to find out if they're valid.
Which is an excellent sign of how empathetic humanity is, but sometimes you do need that restraint before you put someone up on a spike.
Yeah, it becomes, are they actually guilty? If they're guilty, bury them under the prison. If they aren't, then the allegation itself should not be enough to ruin someone, but oftentimes it is.
Hmm.
And then there's one of the infuriating things. I'm trying to remember, the football player was accused of raping a woman. She's recently just been sentenced to 18 months to 2 years in prison for lying to the court.
Sounds about right.
Because it just came out that it never happened. Not only did he not do anything to her, nothing happened to her. She knew nothing happened to her. It wasn't like, well, I thought, no. Nothing happened to her. She knew that the guy was innocent. She intentionally accused him to ruin his life.
Well, there's 2 cases that would fit your bill. Recently,
this one's really recent. The woman just got sentenced like last month, I think.
Oh, then it might be the Bills kicker that was exonerated. Former kicker, I should say, got drafted, spent a year or two, and then midway through camp on his sophomore year, the allegations came out, and the Bills just dropped him like hotcakes.
Yeah, let me see if I can quickly find, because it was just recent, and I want to say it was an athlete. I know that there is the older one where it was the one guy that was going to go to college. He had a promising career ahead of him, was in high school, but there were already some pro teams that were going like, we need to keep an eye on him during college. He got a full ride, and then he was accused. All of that completely dried up. He was sentenced to a fucking ridiculous time in prison, and then finally got cleared when the text messages by...
the older one you're talking about is Brian Banks. The most recent one would be Matt Areza.
Okay, yeah. Those cases always piss me off because they did ruin people's lives, and they shouldn't. The accusation alone shouldn't have been enough to ruin someone's life. The Duke Lacrosse is another good example of the accusation shouldn't have been enough to ruin someone's life. But we keep on having that happen. And part of the issue is that we don't have a severe enough punishment for when we catch someone that has knowingly lied, not they were mistaken, not that the person was
knowingly and maliciously lied, yes.
But knowingly and maliciously lied. And I have to give those caveats because I've had people try to say, well, you're just trying to say that if someone brings an accusation and it turns out that they were mistaken, that they should be sent to prison.
No. An honest mistake or a case of mistaken identity, okay, understood, but knowingly and maliciously is very specific.
Yep, which is why I always stress knowingly and maliciously tries to ruin someone's life like that. I think that bring back the
Code of Hammurabi's way of doing things for that.
Yeah. The punishment for wrongful accusation should be
to serve the punishment for the crime and for which you accused.
Yep. Because if we had that, we would have a fuck ton fewer people trying this shit.
Yeah. However, I will say that the knee-jerk reaction against it has a slight bit of validity. Not in a logical way, but more in a subconscious way.
And I get that, which is why I want it to be a ridiculously hard mark to do. I don't want it to be an easy thing to convict someone if they do a wrongful accusation.
I mean, we'll go back to the same slogan we've been pounding on the last 5 minutes. Knowingly and maliciously is the difference between murder 2 and murder 1. So,
Yeah.
and you probably know how difficult it is to upgrade a murder 2 to a murder 1.
Also, hello, Inquisitor. How goes?
Hey, how's it going?
Pretty good. We're talking about deep shit at the moment.
Deep shit.
Yep.
What kind
Yes,
of deep shit?
philosophy and all that.
Well, we were talking about originally how I get sick of people saying that every life is equal, because every life should only be equal before the law. No one has every life is equal in their own assessment. And people feel gutted when they don't think that every life is equal, when they shouldn't. The people that you care about should always be worth more to you than someone that you don't fucking know.
I can agree with that. I think that really the sentiment isn't necessarily the fact that they view all people on like equal footing in terms of value. I think it's just saying that people have, by virtue of being people, inherent value that is not to be discarded.
Which, to me, the way that you'd say that is every life has value. Not that every life is equal. Because I've heard people legitimately try to claim that every life is equal. Every life is worth the same. And every time I hear that, I'm going, only before the law should that ever be the case.
Well, maybe it is for them. They just have a really shit, family and social life.
The thing is, I don't believe that that's the case for them, because I've had people that have said that every life is equal to them, and then I've done the very simple question of, okay, so if you had to choose between saving insert important person in their life here versus insert convicted chomo here, whose life are you saving?
Anyone with a soul will say the person who they care for.
Yeah. Shit, I could give just Joe Schmo from Idaho in that situation versus the convicted chomo. And everyone should say, I'll save Joe.
Yeah. I mean, the people who weren't, we call them psychopaths. Or would it be sociopath in that case?
The other philosophical question there would be also, does your assessment of that change given the fact that you may or may not know that about them? I mean, it comes down to a value assessment on someone based around their actions. And I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm saying that it's...
it does.
It's difficult. It's difficult to assess because, if you don't know these things about people, then, it's the same sort of situation where you would sit there and, save someone's life and only to find out, oh, well, it was Hitler. Like the one example is that World War I story about dude saved another soldier's life and turned out to be Hitler.
Corporal someone, I forget the last name.
Refused to shoot the disoriented German messenger, and turned out that it was Hitler. Yeah, I know that story.
Yeah. And Buddy regretted it afterwards, but
obviously,
how was he supposed to know?
Yeah,
exactly. That's
the thing. That you might end up going for the wrong person. You might have a incorrect thing that you're factoring into your evaluation. That doesn't mean that your evaluation was different. It means that you had a fucked up appraisal.
Well, I think it's the fact that
when you and
when you value
appraise
people,
two cars, say that car A is worth more than car B. Turns out that they forgot to acknowledge that car B was this particular year, this particular model. So it was worth far more.
In terms of especially valuing human life and all of that kind of stuff, it is very circumstantial.
Oh yeah.
These sorts of examples in
and
philosophy.
It's extraordinarily subjective.
Yes, and it all comes down to the fact that, like, if you know this information, you can make those value judgments. But in the absence of those value that information,
if you're judging
what value judgment,
if you're judging person that you don't know versus person that you don't know, and you're having to decide which one lives and which one dies, that's a point where you should be going, how the fuck am I supposed to answer that? Just like when you're trying to decide if you're put in the horrendous situation where you have to decide which of two children, both of them yours, lives or dies. That should be a moment where you're going, oh God, how the fuck am I supposed to decide this? It should fuck with
I'd say take me.
Yeah. Don't make me decide. I'll do it.
Yeah.
Just because when you don't know anything about someone else, it becomes it's one life and one life. Doesn't mean that everything is one life and one life. And that's the part that pisses me off. And I see people that will say things like, I had to choose between this person and my loved one. And there's not a single day that goes by where I don't feel like a monster. And I'm going, no, you shouldn't feel like a monster. You chose to save your loved one. That was the right answer from where you were. You shouldn't feel an immense amount of guilt about that. If you could only save one, save the one that's worth the most to you.
Yeah. There is some value to be said, though, for the people that do feel guilty about the other, about the other person in that sort of situation, simply by the fact that, it's showing basic, decent human empathy. But you're right in terms of, like, the actual value assessment. Obviously your own social circles, in terms of the people that you value in your life.
And I would say that
you have a preference.
And I would say it depends on the degree to which they're thinking about it. Because if they every so often go, oh shit, where would have that person been? That's one thing. If they are completely broken by it, that's where I'm saying that, no, that's completely maladaptive.
Well, that's also something that is
unfortunately
it's traumatizing because people are.
We're
talking about death here.
To the same point, yeah. To be put into a horrendous decision where, for example, you have to pick between two siblings, for example. There's not a soul, except for someone who is utterly stone cold, that's not going to be distraught and just psychologically destroyed by making that decision.
In the situation where they are of effectively equal value, so they're your two children, that should fuck with you throughout the rest of your life. Because there's no way that couldn't fuck with you throughout the rest of your life. But if it's if
there's a clear hierarchy from a subjective point of view,
I got my wife out of there. I couldn't get anyone else out of there. Someone else died, but I got my wife out. You shouldn't be completely broken by making that decision, because that decision was the right decision.
Again,
as right as it was, due to the fact that the human mind is so empathetical, it is going to still mess them up.
Yeah, I'm gonna say because
it depends on the degree. Because if it's something that it completely destroys you, like I said, that's maladaptive. If it's something that you'll find yourself occasionally in a morose mood, wondering, that's less of an issue.
Well, fortunately, mental health services can aid in, I believe the technical term for such form of guilt is survivor's guilt.
It depends on the situation. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just saying, survivor's guilt is when you're in the situation and you survive when other people did.
A good example of that is there were a bunch of people from 9/11, for instance, that had survivor's guilt because they led a small group out of the area
Yeah.
They couldn't save everyone, but they led their group out, and then they feel guilty because they didn't save more.
Yeah.
Which is a reasonable feeling to have overall.
Oh, yeah. But I would still say that the moment that it becomes complete breakdown, rather than just the occasional shit, I wish I would have been able to save more.
Well, I think that comes down to, even degrees of mental health. People react to things in different sorts of ways. I don't think there's any one correct way about how people adjust to that. And if they need therapy for it, they need therapy for it. It's all good.
Oh, I agree that if they need therapy, they need therapy. I'm not gainsaying therapy in this. I'm saying that if they aren't able to reach a point where they're able to go, I did what I could, that is a net negative.
Yeah. I think we're getting off in the weeds a little bit. It's probably my fault, in bringing up certain circumstances. I do kind of agree with you a little bit there, saying one about someone saying carte blanche, everyone has equal value. That's not true. That's not true. You form values around the people that you know, and it's an unfortunate truth that if you're in a situation where you're with someone that you don't know, you will prioritize the people that you do.
The closer someone is to you, the more valuable they are, unless you fucking hate them.
Yeah. Well, they wouldn't be close to you, would they?
Well, I'm saying close, not just in like an emotional closeness, but in the more alike and the more connection that you have to someone.
Are you referring to a $10 word here? Propinquity?
Good word. But yeah, when you have that element there, it isn't necessarily always a positive one. You can have someone that you're extremely familiar with, that you have that, like I said, closeness to, but you're going, they're an absolute son of a bitch. So
I mean, I would hope at that point then the feeling would be mutual, and then you can cast them into the out group at that point. But again, for me, going with the philosophical assessment, all life is inherently the same. I don't agree with that. I do think that
valuable. I can agree with that.
Yeah,
value is highly subjective because, as I said with Donkey beforehand, it also pisses me off when someone says, no one's property is worth more than someone's life. I disagree.
That's bullshit. Yeah. You decide to try and steal something from me, then you've taken it upon yourself to put yourself in that risk. So feel no...
Which is what I was saying, that sympathy. In that situation, I'm going, bullshit. They chose their life, or they chose to make their life worth less than my belongings.
Yes.
I didn't make that decision for them, but who the fuck am I to argue with their own value assessment of their life?
Yeah.
Take a quick look at a live example from when I was down there, when Adam threw those beans. At that moment for a second.
It was nuts.
Beans, nuts, I don't care. Still, for a moment there, I value my minis more than Adam's well-being.
Sure. But no harm done, so it's all good.
Oh, but by my restraint, yes.
Well, like I said, no harm done, like in the actual, no physical harm were done to the minis. No one, reacted in any sort of way. So it's all good. Yeah, no, when it comes to this shit like that, I hate the idea because there's so many people that like to, say carte blanche that, you know, these sorts of situations, you're just supposed to roll over and let someone victimize you. Fuck that. It doesn't matter if it's property or if it's your life. You defend yourself, period. And the people that want to sit there and say, you're not supposed to do that because they're not, you know, it's an inappropriate use of force, blah, blah, blah. No, it's an appropriate use of force. They're the ones that are trying to victimize you. And you know what sympathy I have for them? Absolutely fucking zero. You can catch a bullet.
Like I said, when I was talking with Donkey about this, I did say, now there is a limit to this, because if someone breaks into your house, you shoot them, you wing them, they start running away. You don't get to chase them down the street and execute them. But
No,
and you don't get to double tap them and execute them after you've brought them down.
Yeah, but
self-defense only goes as far as neutralizing the threat, making them incapable of threatening you further.
Yep, but
exactly.
If you wing them and they keep coming in and you dome them, I have no fucking problem with that.
Yeah. Or if like they're still brandishing a knife after being winged and like still trying to stab you even after being shot,
yeah,
then yeah,
shoot them
again. Because they're still a threat.
Yep. And I was a correction officer. There's something that was drilled into my head when I was a correction officer called the totality of the circumstances. So when you're dealing with an issue like that, you have to look at the totality of the circumstance. Everything gets added into that. Is the person potentially posing a threat to grievous bodily harm, to mortal peril? Then yeah, use whatever fucking tools you have to hand. If they
and necessary force.
Well, that's effectively what it is. When the totality of the circumstance is the mechanism by which you determine what the necessary amount of force is.
Yeah.
So it has an escalation that doesn't have to be you don't have to go through every step in order to warrant the most extreme uses, because you have to look at the circumstance. If someone jumps up to the most extreme instance and you have the only choice of I could kill them and that would stop them, then yeah, kill them. That stops them. But if someone's just getting a bit loud, then you go, hey, shut up. Quiet down.
Shut the fuck up.
Why are you getting so loud? Why are you doing this? Settle down.
Probably calm down.
You don't.
Why do I feel slightly called out at that?
We just tell you to stop mowing.
Yeah. Or revving the engine.
Yeah.
I was referring to something else, but sure.
There wasn't even any grass out there, but you were still trying to mow shit.
It's not my fault that I say no very, very quickly.
No, you didn't say no, because it wasn't no. It was no. And typically it was.
You should have let us know that you wanted to party there, Donkey. We would have gone a little bit, made sure that you paced yourself.
Yeah, and it wasn't even like you would have that constancy that I just did of the no. No, you would do straight up. I'm trying to start a fucking lawnmower, and it just isn't going. It would be no.
Okay. I get your point.
But yeah. So for those that don't get the reference, we're referring to some of the stuff that we encountered in the meetup. Donkey kind of got 0 to 60 in about half a second, and so we had to calm his zooting down a little bit.
Can you really blame him?
Yeah.
It was clear
But it was fun
to go as quickly as he could because he was just constantly revving up. No.
Yes, I did sort of make an ass of myself that one night.
Oh, the donkey making an ass of himself.
Yes.
Sorry, I saw it sitting on the table. I had to pick it up.
Yep. But yeah, it's like I said, it just drives me crazy every time that I hear that argument. And then we also started saying that it's also terrible when just an accusation fucking ruins someone's life.
Oh, I hate that shit too.
It shouldn't be an accusation. It should have to be
31 total accusations, 4 of which reach a grand jury and 7 of which reach a league investigation.
That's not good, but it should still be that it has to actually go through and he has to get convicted.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, it's the fact that social ostracization does not require due process, and that's the problem. Well, it's not even considered for that sort of thing.
Well, the thing
and,
is,
someone's life can be ruined by that. It doesn't even require seeing the inside of the jail cell.
Yep, and also part of the issue is that damage, once it's done, there doesn't really ever seem to be an instance of it being undone. Like when someone is found to have been innocent, you'll still hear for years later about that one time that the Duke Lacrosse boys raped a girl. And you're going, that was found to have been a false accusation. What the fuck do you mean that one time that they did this? It never happened. But because everyone got into it, everyone started throwing shit, and it was decided in the court of public opinion, they just didn't fucking care when it came to the actual truth of the matter. That was beside the point. They had already made their judgment. And that's the part that pisses me off about it. Because...
Well, I mean, like I said, it's the fact that the court of public opinion does not require due process.
Yeah, it doesn't require due process. And not only does it not require due process, but if it is found to have been complete bullshit, then that doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
Because everyone has already made up their mind. So by the time that it is found out that it was false, unless it's found out that it was false in some massive way, Johnny Depp is a good example of this. Mm-hmm. Johnny Depp, so many fucking people had judged Johnny Depp. And then the Johnny Depp case hit, it became a massive thing, and suddenly a lot of people were going, oh shit, I was fucking wrong.
Let's leave that alone. Amber Heard's lawyers are extremely litigious on this matter still.
I don't give a shit. Fuck Amber Heard. I hope she gets drummed out of Hollywood. Not like they're worth anything anymore anyway.
And there's absolutely
nothing... Come at me, Amber Heard. I don't give a shit. Fuck you.
There's absolutely nothing in what I said that they could come after me for, because that was just a statement of things that people were originally on Amber Heard's side.
I can claim in the court that my dog stepped on a bee, and it's fine.
No, it wasn't that your dog stepped on a bee. It's my dog stepped on a
bee.
All right.
Fuck that.
This might just be an outsider's opinion, but I've always believed in America you can sue a cheese sandwich, or at least get a court date for a lawsuit.
Depends
Well,
on
I say it depends on the area and depends on the judge. Because I mean, in California and in Texas, apparently, tortious interference, that doesn't exist. So it's fine.
Do not summon Ricada. We do not need that.
Oh, I want to hear from Ricada about the whole Mark Wade, Mark Zaid thing. I don't think he's ever actually come out and talked about it, other than when Zaid was running his mouth on Twitter. It was the one interaction I've ever had with Nick Ricada, where I was all like, he's just being patently false and stupid. Is this the reason why people hate lawyers? And then Ricada responded with, "It's why I hate them." So
that's one way to put it.
Yep. That's the only interaction I've ever had with Nick Ricada, but it was pretty funny. It was back when we were doing the whole comic book curation thing too.
Yeah, Nick Ricada seems like a chill dude. I want to go out and get a beer with Nick at some point.
I want to play a game of Warhammer against Nick.
True.
Wait, Blood plays Warhammer?
Yes, he does. Dude, he's got. Have you not watched any of his streams? He's got an Imperium of Man flag in the back behind him.
Oh, he's one of those.
So which army does he play?
I think he plays Space Marines.
Ah. Has he released what chapter? What? I
have no idea.
Legion?
Yeah, Legion chapter. I have no idea. I think he's loyal Space Marines, but I don't remember exactly what. And I think it's like he doesn't play anymore, like really, but he's like still really into the lore. Like he's got a whole shit ton of the Horse Heresy books and shit like that on his shelf.
Nice.
Sounds good.
But yeah, it's infuriating, the amount of shit that's allowed to just skate by. And as I was saying with Donkey, I think one of the things that should be done is when there is a claim that is made and it is found to have been entirely vindictive, and that's a very high bar that I would want it to be set at, it has to be found to be entirely vindictive. Not that it was a mistake, not that it was anything else. It has to be 100% malice.
Yeah, mens rea and mens culpa. Yeah, sure.
Yep. That should be something that the person then gets fucked over a barrel for.
I agree. I 100% agree. This is why I don't like social justice.
Yeah. And I've said many times that I'm very much the bring back the code of Hammurabi in that matter. And their punishment should be the punishment that the person would have received if they had actually been sentenced.
Yeah. I'll say I've said it several times that social justice is neither social nor is it justice. It is mob mentality revenge.
Yeah. And it is struggle sessions in the Marxist and Maoist fashion. Which I cannot wait for that shit. I was about to say something and then I realized that I can't say it. Not because I would get in trouble, but because I don't think that it'll ever happen.
No, what?
I was about to say I can't wait for it to die out.
For it to die out? Yeah, it's not going to die out. It's something we've got to. It's here to stay, and you need to.
It's a zombie ideology.
Like Anita Sarkeesian, everything is social justice, and you need to point it all out.
Oh,
yeah, it's a
to bring up Anita.
ideology.
You did hear a week or so ago, Femme Frequency filed for bankruptcy and is going under.
Couldn't have happened to better people.
Yeah, Femme Frequency is gone.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm just wondering, whatever happened to her podcast, and then her a Discord server that was invite only, based around how much that you donated to her Patreon and shit like that. I guess the grift is dying down, but it's all I gotta say is it takes one controversy for her to say something stupid, and then someone else to say, "Hey, you're stupid," to put her back in the fucking limelight. I mean, how many times do we see? Absolutely every single time that there's any sort of controversy around any video game, every single fucking journalist at Kotaku and any of those other places love to bring up Gamergate. Yep. Every single fucking time, even if there's nothing that has anything to do with Gamergate, they always bring it up.
They're still trying to say that Gamergate had shit to do with Trump election.
In a kind of roundabout, not really kind of way.
The closest that you can say is that Gamergate made people doubt some journalists. And because some people doubted some journalists, not necessarily doubted them because of Gamergate, just Gamergate did make people doubt some journalists. And then as a separate thing, because people doubted some journalists, they listened to what Trump actually said rather than just what people said he said.
Different exact points, same logic is what I'm saying there, Sanguine.
Yep.
My point was, it was another awakening of the grassroots side of politics that Trump on the right and, I hate to say it, Bernie Sanders on the left has awoken.
Oh yeah. Bernie was part of the same sort of crowd on the left as the whole.
Unfortunately, unlike Trump, Bernie just sort of.
Well, he folded. He capitulated to the socialists.
Saying that he capitulated to the socialists, that's kind of like saying, I surrendered to my army.
Well, I mean,
I'm
both
pretty
him
sure
and
you
Trump
can
were
find
saying,
historical examples of that.
But both him and Trump were saying the same thing.
They weren't their army anymore. It was someone else in command of their army.
Yeah.
So, like I said, they were saying the same thing. They were wanting to dredge the swamp. They were wanting to get rid of corruption in politics. They were both saying the same thing.
Oh yeah. The thing.
And all I gotta say is, to show that I'm not some sort of right-wing bootlicker here. Dredging the swamp there, Trump. Really? And you're gonna pardon Blagojevich?
I've given that more thought. How was Blagojevich actually convicted? Was it a technicality that civically wouldn't stand up, or kind of, sort of, because Chicago politics begets Chicago politics? I hate to say it, but I don't think he was convicted fully fairly.
I don't care if he was convicted fairly or not. He definitely deserved to be in prison. But here, let me.
So I can understand that sentiment, but at the same time, for me, things have to be done. The right thing has to be done in the right way in order for it to be right.
Yeah. I'll read it here. After Blagojevich threatened to stop the state's dealings with the Bank of America court over a shutdown factory in Chicago, under the direction of the U.S. Attorney Patrick Fitzgerald, Governor Blagojevich was arrested at his home by federal agents on December 9th, 2008, and charged with corruption. The Justice Department complained alleged that the governor conspired to commit several pay-to-play schemes, including attempting to obtain personal gain through corrupt use of his authority to fill the United States Senate seat vacated by Barack Obama following the election of him as president. Claiming that in wiretapped recordings, Blagojevich discussed his desire to get something in exchange for an appointment to the seat. After various outreach efforts, he appointed former state attorney general Roland Burris on New Year's Eve 2008. Burris was seated after some initial opposition in January 2009. A trial was set for June 3rd, 2010, and U.S. Attorney Patrick Fitzgerald spoke out on the charges, characterizing Blagojevich's actions as trying to auction an open seat off to the highest bidder. The Illinois House and Senate moved quickly to impeach the governor for use of power and corruption. On January 8th, the Illinois House voted 114-1 with three abstentions to impeach Blagojevich. The charges brought to the House emphasized Blagojevich's alleged abuses of power and his alleged attempts to sell legislative authorizations and or vetoes, and gubernatorial appointments, including that of Obama's vacated Senate seat. Blagojevich was taped by the FBI saying, quote, "I've got this thing and it's fucking golden. I'm not going to give it up for fucking nothing." I mean, do I need to keep going?
No, it sounds fairly cut and dry, but
fuck that guy. He should be swinging on a rope. Fuck that guy.
You still get what I mean when I say Chicago politics begets Chicago politics.
Oh, dude. Okay, that's the thing, that Blagojevich was playing Chicago politics. That's the problem, and he should have been made an example of.
Yeah, but Illinois. They very rarely go after one of their own, and I guess when you see one example of them actually doing it.
I'm just saying, man. You get you put him in the hot seat, and you burn the whole fucking corrupt system down. That's what I'm saying. And Trump, of course, pardoned him. So, just saying.
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, but when there's a presidential pardon, isn't there typically a letter written discussing the general reasoning?
I'm not sure about that. Okay. I'm not sure if the president is required to give any sort of justification either. Because there's always appeals to the president for presidential pardons when the last appeal goes through the Supreme Court, and it's not in favor that the people want. They always write to the president for presidential pardons.
Mm-hmm.
So.
The thing that always pisses me off.
I can just say here, I have reasons why I don't like Trump, and they're not because he had 3 fucking scoops of ice cream, CNN. How about you do your actual fucking job?
And you and I talked about this on the trip, that I said, yeah, there's reasons that you can dislike Trump. And I have no problem with someone saying, I dislike Trump. The issue comes in only when those reasons are either, what the fuck does that have to do with anything?
Yeah.
Or they're completely fallacious. Those are the 2 problems that I have, because a shit ton of the issues were completely fallacious. He said that there are very fine people on both sides. And then he immediately afterwards said, and I'm not talking about the Nazis and the white nationalists. They need to be condemned wholly.
Yes.
Also,
that's the thing,
he wasn't talking about Antifa either, because in order for that fucking thing to work, they're trying to say that, well, he was saying that it was the neo-Nazis were the fine people, and that the people that we consider right-wing but are still to the left of center, they were the fine people on the other side. No, you don't get to play weaselly shit like that. He made it very clear he wasn't referring to neo-Nazis, nor was he referring to Antifa. Those were the 2 groups that he was saying, these groups both suck. They need to be condemned.
Okay, so I've sort of tracked down Trump's reasoning. Let me see if I can pull up that page again. It's just it's an off-the-cuff quote that's been given by BBC. That was a tremendously powerful, ridiculous sentence. Basically saying he was overcharged for what he did.
No. When you are elected and you are given the absolute confidence of the people to perform your function, and you betray that confidence, then I don't care if you're a governor.
Selling a Senate seat, yeah.
Well, I don't care if you're a governor. I don't care if you're a senator. I don't care if you're a representative. I don't care if you're a cop. You are the worst possible thing that you can be in this country, a traitor.
Yeah.
That's why
fucking short drop and sudden stop for all of them. I don't give a shit.
One of the things that pisses me off the most is I'm trying to remember the name.
Fuck you,
of
Trump. 14 years was exactly what he deserved. Fuck you.
I'm trying to remember the exact case, but it was the FBI. Back when the FBI was actually doing things that the FBI should be trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
There was a FBI agent who ended up tracking down and apprehending an absolutely ridiculous con man. It wasn't the catch me if you can guy. This is a different con man. Then what he did was he went, hey, you're ridiculously good at conning people. You're ridiculously good at getting to meet with people. Are you willing to collect evidence that people are willing to take bribes? Will reduce your sentence. You'll be employed by us. You'll get paid by us. The guy agreed, served a light sentence, and then entered the employ of the FBI. During that, he ended up working his way from local politicians all the way up to the fucking Senate, meeting with people, speaking with them. He didn't have any real ability to force anything. He would just talk with them, come up with a deal that he was in charge of. Normally it was that he was contracted by a emirate prince. And he was looking to make certain arrangements in the United States using the emirate money. So there was a restriction on how much land they could buy at the time, and he would meet with people and he would see if there was any way that they could flex how much land could be purchased. And people would make the deal, and he would then bring back that evidence wearing wires. And a good chunk of this was also in rooms that had been wired up to do video. And he collected all this evidence. A bunch of people went down for the corruption and for being willing to take bribes, as they fucking should have gone down for. There was only one problem. Like I said, he started with local officials and then he went all the way up to the Senate. When he found out that a fuck ton of senators were willing to take bribes, and he provided that evidence, well, that was reported up the chain to announce or to see what they could do as far as pursuing that. It hit the Senate committee that was oversight for this.
Oh, and the Senate dropped the entire thing. Surprise, surprise.
Well, a bunch of them were named. Then a number of people that were named put forward a bill that restricted the FBI's ability to do these sorts of corruption stings. They got that slammed through faster than anything could come out from the investigation.
Surprise, surprise.
Making that investigation post-Tock illegal. And that just got swept under. Nothing came of it. It just, whoop, gone. Which, the fuck? That shit pisses me off.
I mean, it should. And I did look deeper into it. And Quiz, I already know you think that this is far too short a sentence. But for what Blagojevich did, how many years do you two think he got?
14 to 20?
14.
Yeah.
That's not a ridiculous sentence for selling a Senate seat.
No, it's not.
And if anything, it's ridiculous in the other direction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it should have been much longer. And Gen Pop too. He shouldn't have been in the fucking like white collar prison like he was. Fuck that.
Now, putting him in regular prison would have been a death sentence.
I'm okay with that.
I disagree. I don't think it would have been a death sentence.
Yeah, no, I don't think it would have been either. Say, especially if he were to sell off to, because I mean he already was fairly rich before trying to sell off a Senate seat. I'm sure he could have probably bribed out of several thugs to protect him in prison. It's not off, Either way, it still should have, he still should have been in danger, and he still should have had the fear of God.
The only way that would have been, there's certain people that, it's effectively game on.
He's not a chomo,
in prison. If someone's a chomo, most prisons, that's game on. If someone is former police, most prisons, that's game on. If someone was a former correction officer in most prisons, that's game on.
Really? I hadn't heard the former corrections officer, but I did definitely know about like former cops.
Oh yeah, former correction officers are hated by the offenders in prison. That was the term that we were always told that we had to refer to them as offenders, not convicts, not inmates, offenders.
Oh come on. They're menaces to society that deserve to be locked away.
Yep, but due to that, if a correction officer was ever found guilty, or anytime that a correction officer is found guilty of something, they're shipped out of state.
Yeah. Well, that's usually how a lot of that kind of stuff goes. I mean, you can't be in an area where they would know about you.
Well, for police, correction officer, any sort of Leo, effectively. Yeah, they get shipped out.
Yeah.
For
talking about another Leo that should be swinging from the ropes. The one that I always go back to. You're fucked on his barrel. Just saying, or his dust cover. Just saying.
Which one?
You're fucked on his barrel, or on his dust cover. Guy that mag dumped on the exterminator in the hotel.
Oh, okay.
I'm not fully aware of that story.
Oh, do you not know about this one, Eeyore? I can look it up and give you all the details. Suffice it to say, this
are completely okay.
No, this guy was he was getting 3 sets of instructions from 3 different officers, all conflicting, and the call was that someone in a hotel thought that this guy was brandishing a gun. What the reality was that he was an exterminator. It was a bird pellet rifle, and he had taken a lady in there, and he was just kind of drunk and cruising with her. Right? Cops show up. Number one, the cop in question had "You're fucked" emblazoned on his service dust cover for his AR.
Means nothing to the case. Means nothing to the case.
No, but it speaks to the mind of the officer. And the entire time, they get him out into the front, the hallway area. 3 officers screaming at him, giving him conflicting instructions, while the guy is laying on the ground, begging for his life and trying to crawl forward to the officer. His pants are falling down. He reaches to pull up his pants, and the cop mag dumps on him. All of it is on body camera.
That doesn't sound particularly good.
Yeah, that's one of the...
No, the cop should be fucking swinging from a tree. I don't give a fuck. Fuck that guy.
That's one of the reasons why in Corrections Academy, one of the things that they kind of drilled in was as few people giving instructions as can be done. So if one officer is giving instructions, let that one officer give instructions. Don't everyone start yelling. You can add in if it's they start moving towards you, yeah, you're allowed to go back up. But don't start adding in your own instructions. If one dude's giving them, that dude's giving them.
Mm-hmm.
Because it prevents confusing instructions and it prevents the stand up, sit down, lay on your belly sort of instructions.
And that's exactly what had happened to him too. Stand up, sit down, get on your knees, get on your stomach, spread your hands wide, get up, get on your knees. They kept on doing that. But here's the totality of it. On January 18th, 2016, Daniel Leighton Shaver of Granbury, Texas, was fatally shot by police officer Philip Brailsford. Philip Brailsford, a.k.a. Mr. Murderer, should be swinging from a fucking tree right now. Fuck that guy. I hope I hope every horrible thing happens to that faggot in his life. I hope he dies in shame and unloved and unsung. Fuck that guy. Anyway, in the hallway of a La Quinta Inn Suites in a hotel in Mesa, Arizona, police were responding to a report that a rifle had been pointed out the window of Shaver's hotel room. After the shooting, the rifle, previously assumed to be a lethal weapon, which had remained in the room, was determined to be a pellet gun. Following an investigation, Brailsford was charged with second-degree murder. No. Not with your fucked on his dust cover. Just saying, dude was going in there looking to shoot someone. And with a lesser manslaughter charge, later to be found not guilty by a jury. You know what? All 12 of those jury members also should be swinging from a fucking tree. Fuck every single person involved in this. This is a miscarriage of justice.
I disagree with you at several points.
Okay, go on.
They're fairly minor. Well, not fairly minor. So one is the dust cover thing. Having that on does not mean intent to me.
I mean, by that same logic, the Rittenhouse photos from days before would count.
I mean, they do to me. I've said a million times that the Rittenhouse trial was definitely not as cut and dry as everyone likes to say it is.
What, that buddy was going out there looking for trouble?
There's some legitimacy, I think, to that claim.
I would disagree with that as well.
Yeah, I think this is just a agree to disagree moment across images, artwork, and other expressions showing intent to do harm.
Yeah, I think that that's something that we won't be able to convince each other of our correctness either way. Like I said, I disagree with the assessment on that, but I don't really think that you'll be able to convince me that I'm wrong on that, nor do I think that I'll be able to convince you that you're wrong on that.
Yeah, no, I feel quite solidly about this because I also
we can tell.
Yep.
I also saw the body cam. I also saw the body cam footage, and that is, to me, more stomach-churning than fucking war footage. It is a horrible, gross miscarriage of justice, and again, it's the fact that it's a betrayal of a trust given to these people. In their positions of authority and power.
At least from the way that it was laid out thus far. Like I said, I don't remember the body cam. Don't remember seeing the body cam footage. I might have. I don't remember seeing it. But from the way that it's been described, there's absolute shit that I'm going, okay, that was done inappropriately. But
okay, well, that may be the reason why he got off. Body cam footage was sealed, and it was admissible in evidence for the his trial. But it's all over the place on social media.
Yeah, sealing the body cam footage would easily cause trouble. Oh, get back here, you little rat.
But yeah.
So fuck that judge too. Fuck that judge too.
I definitely have problems with the way that shit gets done a fair chunk of the time, because it's done in a way that is not following what... Now, this is a bit of backseat thing on my part. It's done in a way that I do not think should be the protocol. Because there's rules that would be fairly easy to implement that would do a hell of a lot in order to avoid a lot of the problems. But with the rules as they are, I have a hard time convicting a lot of the officers that a bunch of people say, oh, it's cut and dry. And I'm going, well, given the way that they were trained, given the way that they were instructed, no.
Well, that's a failing on the police departments then, for failing to, properly instruct and train these officers.
Oh, and I've said that there's a failure of police departments across the nation, because we have a bunch of police officers that they don't do as much physical training as they should. Effectively, police officers across the nation. They don't do as much training in general as they should. They also have been lowering standards across the nation. When you lower standards, you make it so that the only thing that an officer can safely do in a situation is reach for lethal force. If your officer is trained up properly so that if there's a problem, they can go hands-on and they can do so rather comfortably, the number of times that they have to reach for that firearm, drop. If your officers are trained up properly with how to make sure that there's one person designated as the person giving instructions, the number of instances where something happens because people were given contradictory info decreases. There's a lot of shit that can be done in order to improve policing. It starts mainly with increased training, increased standards.
I also think that the police, the officer themselves, should be held to a higher standard as well. And the betrayal of that trust should be punished. It should be punished to the extent, if not even worse, than it would be for civilians.
The held to the highest standard has to start with having the high requirements to become a police officer.
I can agree with that, but I also think that
you've been lowering standards to become a police officer, then demanding that they're held to the highest standard. Well, no, they aren't. We've already said that they aren't going to be. So you have to start with where it all begins.
I don't see that as an absolution, though, my guy. I don't see that as absolution for what they've done. At the end of the day, you're also a human being.
I don't necessarily see it as an absolution. I see it as a natural result. When someone is not confident in their ability to go hands-on, so they end up reaching for a firearm, that is just going to be what happens. And I have a hard time saying, well, they shouldn't have reached for the firearm. They should have gone hands-on when they don't have the skills.
But at what point do you actually hold the officer accountable then?
When it is... So, if it is completely beyond the ken, I hold them accountable. If it's something that, well, yes, this could have been handled by someone who was trained in how to subdue someone physically, but these officers weren't trained in how to subdue someone physically, then it becomes that's fucking on the system. The system needs to be revised.
But that, to me, does not absolve the cop of their responsibilities.
The responsibility
They know. They know when they take that vow. They know when they take the vow to become a police officer.
At one point, I would have agreed.
I'm just saying, man. I'm having trouble trying to wrap my mind around that, man. I say accountability stops with the actions of the officer. Period.
At one point, I would have absolutely agreed that they knew what they were signing on to. That was also a point where we had the standards. When you lower the standards, people are signing on to the standards that you...
But you can't know if they have the standards or not. You can't know if he's been trained or not.
You can. You can.
No, you can't.
Yes, you absolutely fucking can. Because
are you telling me that okay, so when you're getting fucking heated here, and I'm getting heated here too, are you telling me that regardless of what anything anyone says, that they have not gone through the extra treatment that they would be for any sort of crisis relief, any sort of responding officer training that they might have gone through? You would figure that at least the people that are going to be responding to those calls would have gone through that training.
The standards that I'm referring to begin with, are the standards to become a police officer. Those have been routinely lowered. The physical
and when you take the vow to become an officer, you accept the responsibility of the duty that you are intending to take care of. Are you not?
Which is
to try and play moderator here.
Standards that are there for the job. Because, Inquisitor, if you're applying for a job and the job says that you have to have the ability to lift 50 pounds, and you have the ability to lift 50 pounds, and then someone gets pissed off at you because you don't have the ability to lift 150 pounds in the same way that you lift something that's 50 pounds, wouldn't you be going, dude, my job said I have to be able to lift 50 pounds. This is 150 pounds.
Okay. But I believe I'm starting to hone in on the issue here. Quiz has a very high opinion of the civic duty of both LEOs, civil servants, politicians, everyone. Sanguine, you're taking a very pragmatic view. Unfortunately, that does sort of, in this case at least, go against that civic value that Quiz has put into these positions. Well, I get both points here. It's just becoming unreconcilable, and both of you are just going to get pissed off at one another.
The thing is that you have to have the requirements in order to become something.
Indeed. However,
to the responsibility that you're placing on them. Because you can say that, well, this is now something that let's say that every teacher should be able to deal with a student who has suicidal ideation.
Or at least be able to recognize that and recommend them either through the school system directly or directly to the parents for psychiatric assistance.
Yep, and if that was never in the requirements for the position, it was never in the standards for the position, it's just something that you believe should be something that every teacher should be able to do, and the training, when it's offered, is substandard.
Sanguine, I'm going to interrupt you here real quick. Apples and oranges, my guy. Law enforcement is pretty, you get what you're getting with law enforcement, right? You're going off on the weeds and saying that this is an extra sort of thing that a teacher should be getting as an elective. There's no elective.
No, I wasn't saying it as
training.
I wasn't saying it as an elective. I was saying if everyone in society says that teachers should be able to do this, or must be able to do this. But at no point was it in the requirement in order to become a teacher, nor is the training for that sufficient in order to actually, the training that is provided for that sufficient to actually be able to do that.
Okay.
Then
or to make it more allegorical correctly, the training standards have, and we're not talking just recently, I'm well aware that since like the 90s, police training standards have fallen.
Yeah. The amount of time that they spend training at the range has decreased. So their accuracy is going to decrease. Just by the nature. If you don't train it, you aren't going to be as proficient. The amount of time that they spend training hand to hand has decreased. If you don't train it, you don't have those skills. The physical requirements, the strength requirements, the speed requirements have been decreased. The intellectual requirements have been decreased. Now, I agree that it would be fantastic if we had all the standards to hold someone to the standard that I agree we should be holding police to as a whole. But my problem is that if we don't give them the proper ways of attaining those, then to just go, well, fuck you, you don't have them, hang.
I don't agree that they don't even have access to them either. I think that it's probably a failing in the fact that there's no longer a standardized sort of measurement that you can or can be removed from the force if you lack the like the military have standards which are also lacking.
You have to go to range a specific number of times every month. You have to
PT, so on and so forth.
You have
if you don't meet
a quarterly exam that you have to pass, or you lose your badge, for example, would be a quick fix.
Well, that's something that was in the military and is no longer in the military.
Yeah, but we're going to see the slide in the military due to that as well.
I already have. But anyway, I'm just saying.
And that's kind of what I'm saying, that
if these sorts of standards are the problem, okay, I think it should be stressed to the officer that they need to do their due diligence when they accept the duty and sign on the line. Do you not agree? I mean, in my opinion, the onus on the duty belongs to the officer. And if they're not getting what they need, they should be going to the department and saying, hey, I need this.
The question there becomes, are they aware that they're not getting sufficient levels? You could say yes, but that's a very individual question.
It comes down to several things. Are they aware is one part of it. Is it even made possible for them to do it? Because when I was in corrections, we did have a hand-to-hand training. It was, you renewed that once a year. It should have been a fuck ton more than once a year. There was also rifle qualifications. Again, it was once a year. Should have been a fuck ton more than once a year.
Quarterly.
Should have been more than that. It should have. Ideally,
quarterly would be a good standard.
Ideally, from my perspective, about a fifth to a quarter of time should be training. But when I was a corrections officer, even if I had wanted to, which I did to a fair extent, want to be able to meet the requirements that I would ideally have, I could not possibly do it. And I could not possibly do it because I was working full-time, plus I was getting at least a day or two mandatory overtime every week. The amount of time that it took to do what I would have, and what I think is the proper amount of training, my options would have been I could die due to exhaustion or I could die due to starvation. If I wanted to get all of that in.
Fork left.
You need to have it so that it is not just something that, well, these officers need to go and do that on their own time. Because there isn't enough time. Which is why I'm saying you need to have that baked in. And until
in earlier years, officers could have used their like on-duty time for those sorts of trainings, and that was perfectly fine.
That's what I'm saying. That it should be that they have
time training for the job should be job time.
Yep.
That's just simple logic in any career, let alone police.
Scheduled on-duty training. And ideally, like I said, a fifth to a quarter. Scheduled on-duty training. So if you work 40 hours a week, 10 hours should be training.
Yeah, and my mention of quarterly was for evaluations.
Yeah. So that is not possible with how we have everything set up at the moment, because we do not have that baked in.
I mean, and you can adapt the standards, the FAA mandate to pilots, just translate them over, and you'd probably get a hell of a lot better police force. However, your police force would shrink by 90% for about half a year.
So what I'm saying should be done is, first off, raise the requirements to become a police officer. Then also fix the issues by making it so that you have the training baked in like that. So a fifth to a quarter of the time you're training. And split that between 3 types of training. You should have, and it might be 4 types of training, but at least 3 types of training. It should be your hand-to-hand, your equipment training, which would include your firearm, and then it should be your interpersonal / legal.
Oh, I'd happily welcome more cops being more legally aware.
Yep. And I think that those 3 things should be baked into training for a fifth to a quarter of the time. So if you work 40 hours, between 8 and 10 hours a week should be training, and it should be split between those 3 things. So you could have it so that it's on a 3-week rotation, and you do your hand-to-hand 1 week, you do your equipment the next, you do your interpersonal and legal the third.
Excuse me while I go cuss out Cannibalistic for calling me AOC without a voice changer. Fuck you.
Nice. But
man, I'm currently looking at was it Police One Academy, which is online. Like they do online courses for police, for law enforcement training, and so on and so forth. And I'm just looking into just one of the courses and one of the subsections of the courses. Like I looked at defensive tactics for police, which is hand-to-hand training.
Yep.
The actual breakdown for the course is really extensive. Like really expensive. So in terms of that, well, I'm just saying, with these sorts of things, I think for the academy, those standards should not be lax afterwards. is that you should be tested on them at least quarterly to make sure that you are maintaining the standards from the academy.
And what I'm saying is that you aren't. And
you're not. And sure, that's...
But also, it is virtually impossible to maintain the academy level of training afterwards. Because that time is not made available.
Which is a structural issue with the current policing system.
Which is,
and I could agree. I could agree with that, but that still does not absolve the police for not maintaining the standard. You know what I mean?
Oh, I'm more in agreement with you. It just
depends on whether you mean the
standard exists.
It depends on whether you mean the individual police. Well, first off, that standard that's in the academy is not the standard that they're then tested on when they are tested on, which is in most cases yearly. So the amount of time when I was in Corrections Academy, the amount of time that we spent on the hand-to-hand training, we had a number of full days spent on hand-to-hand training and hand-to-hand proficiency. The requirements for that were fairly strict. The requirements to re-qualify were much lower. So, for instance, in order to be able to get through the academy section, one part was the pressure point. The pain compliance is what it's called. So, in order to qualify, you had to learn 13 of the 13 instructed pain compliance points. In order to re-qualify, you had to be able to do 3, I think it was. So from 13 to 3. During the firearm training, you had to fire a fair few number of rounds downrange through the service rifle and through the shotgun. The number of rounds that you had to fire in order to re-qualify was less than half. Also, there was absolutely, or not absolutely, well, no, it was absolutely, because in the about 3 years I was there was no time that I was given to do this on the clock. There was no time allotted for range practice. There was no time allotted for self-defense practice. There was no time allotted for pain compliance point practice.
Okay. So I'm looking at just Illinois right now.
Yep.
This is just Illinois, right? Illinois has what's called the POWER test. POWER stands for Police Officer Wellness Evaluation Report.
Yep.
You need to be able to pass the POWER test and be recertified every 60 days.
Oh, that's rather
2 months in Illinois? Okay.
Also, you have the firearms rule. Now, this is the one where it gets a little iffy. Firearms qualification is annual.
Yep.
So it is once a year for the training for that.
And then again, the main component that I'm curious about is, do they have the training time scheduled in on the clock, or is it that you have to do it on your own?
They have a 4-hour firearms training course that they have to go through. It's a waiver process. Previously, as here, example, out-of-state trained law enforcement officers, some county correctional officers previously trained by IDOC, grandfathered law enforcement officers did not receive the mandated firearms training prior to 1970. So if you're a cop before 1970, you're not required to meet these standards. Let's see here.
Which nowadays very few cops from that era
are still cops, yeah. State mandates that you require to report all officers' qualification dates once a year. For example, if an officer qualifies on April 10th and again in October 10th, you may use either of those dates. So it is voluntary to qualify.
Yeah, it shouldn't be voluntary.
I don't think it should be voluntary either.
It should be mandatory.
At least the physical fitness section of Illinois does require standardization for once every 60 days. And all of this is also part of that is wavered by time. So any time that you spend doing any of the training or anything else is on the clock training.
Okay, so they do waiver that. That's rather nice.
Yes.
A lot of areas, they don't.
And so I'm just, looking here. Illinois Law Enforcement Training and Standards Board is where I'm reading all of this.
Yep. And if that's the case, then that is fantastic. Like I said, my problem is that it
does come down state to state because every state is different. Not every state, has a standardized practice. And I wouldn't recommend a federal mandate either because I have a problem with federal mandated anything.
Yeah, I don't want a federal mandate. I want every state to do the proper thing. And
I think that there should be a good minimum standard, and then if any state wants to go beyond that, that's fine too. But I mean, just looking at the Illinois' at least physical fitness ones, I don't think that there's
I was also about to ask, how low have their physical fitness fallen?
1.5 miles, bench press standards. Let's see here. Specific sequence. Sit and reach test, sit-ups, repetition maximum bench press, and 1.5 mile run. So I don't know what that is in comparison to military. Because I know the military one changed recently.
Yeah, that's not all that impressive of a test. Also, it didn't have a hand-to-hand component, which is something that...
Well, this is just physical fitness. This is not hand-to-hand, combat training.
Yep.
That's a completely different bit.
Did they have a hand-to-hand component as well in one of the others?
They do.
Okay.
They do. Like I said, there's a whole broad section here just for training, which is just all the different kinds of training. The ones that have actual minimum standards, at least in terms of what they put on the website, is they have a physical fitness and then they have firearms training. Those are the major two. And then anything else, I think, is just sort of, I'm not going to say elective. I'm sure that they probably do have a standard, but it's not, the one that they regularly test.
Mm-hmm.
And it's probably voluntary, but it's voluntary with reimbursement.
But yeah, my point, like I said, is that we need to, and typically the larger departments do a bit better on this, at least historically they have, when it comes to actually factoring in training. But it comes down to if the officer is meeting the standards that they were held to and is acting in the way that they were trained to act, then I have difficulty going after an officer. It's when they fall below their standards that are actually possible to maintain standards. By possible to maintain, I mean that the training time is factored in. Because you could have that every police officer must be an absolutely ridiculous sharpshooter. But then if you never give them any range time, just because you say that they all must be ridiculous sharpshooters, that's bullshit. You need to give them the range time in order to make.
I mean, the major thing comes down to here, Sanguine, is that I think that the standard by which you must maintain is agreed upon when you sign the dotted line and become an officer, and that's just in upholding the law. That's doing your job. And in terms of what you're bearing when you perform the function
and
of
this
that
is getting into the point that I made earlier.
This is nothing. This has nothing to do with minimum standards of training. Okay, this is entirely due to how you perform the function of your job. This is purely mentality. It has nothing to do with physical.
Like I said, the other part of it is if they're acting in accordance with the policy and training. Because
in the circumstance that sparked all of this, 3 officers yelling at a guy, all of them holding guns on him without trying to handcuff him at all, telling him conflicting points of view, and then when he does something out of the ordinary because he's been being told 3 different conflicting things, a guy mag dumps, straight up murders a man.
So the parts
I think that's pretty lacking in standards. In bearing what is becoming a police officer.
The parts that I would say are not necessarily, but are potentially issues with the training and policy are the 3 officers giving contradictory instructions. That's a training and policy. Because the training and policy should be 1 officer gives instructions. That's what the policy should be. That's what the training should be. So it should be the first officer that starts giving instructions. That's the officer giving instructions. That part makes sense?
I would almost say that instruction giver should be determined beforehand, because in the heat of the moment, everyone's going to just start shouting.
Well, the thing is that you can't really do instruction giver should be determined beforehand. The way that it typically works is the instruction giver is the first one, and then they can hand it off, but it has to be a verbal handoff. So,
to my knowledge, the policy is that the senior officer is the instruction giver.
That's one of the standard.
And to my knowledge, also, is that in the line of duty, only 1 officer is supposed to be giving any sort of instructions.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said,
so that was a violation of policy.
Like I said, I'm not familiar with their policies. I'm not familiar with their training. So I know that when it came to the corrections, that was trained for my corrections academy, because there had been issues in the past with multiple officers giving contradictory directions. So it became something that then was added to the training and to the policy. It's 1 officer, and the way that it worked was first officer to engage with the person is the OIC, the officer in charge. Then you had 1 person that was also the only person that was using the radio. So typically when it was the first person on the scene, they would be the OIC for the radio and in person. Once a second officer came up, typically that officer would transfer 1 of those responsibilities to the second officer. It would either be that you'd key up your radio and you would say, Officer Smuckatelli, I am transferring the OIC to Officer so-and-so. And then Officer so-and-so would go, Officer so-and-so, I accept the chain of command. All right, accept the command. And then they would be the person that would do the radio. The person that was talking would still be the person talking. If another officer showed up and the person that was talking didn't want to be the person talking anymore, they would go, Officer so-and-so, take over. And then that officer would have to respond, copy that, taking over, and then they would start to issue commands. And it was done that way because there had been problems earlier, so it became part of training and it became part of policy that you had this first officer took on radio and directions. Then, as additional officers arrived, they would take on additional responsibilities. If it was 2 officers that were on rounds together, and the first one started giving instructions, the second one would be the radio. And the radio was never allowed to go hands-on. So the radio...
Well, I'm looking directly at Mesa County police training here.
So Mesa is Arizona?
Is the Arizona one with Philip Brailsford. I still don't think that this is an excuse, but their interpersonal communications, they only got 1.5 hours of training on that. But unless you're an absolute fucking retard who is just learning the language the day that you are going to become a police officer, I think you might know a little thing or two about interpersonal communications before the 1.5 hour training session.
But like I said, when it comes to...
Regardless, 90 minutes is extremely subpar. Even I, a complete untrained moot, can tell you that.
When it comes to...
I'm just saying.
When it comes to the specific bit of training that I was talking about, where it's the one officer gives instructions, one officer does radio, no one else does shit when it comes to either of those. That was harped on because, like I said, it had been an issue previously that you would have 3 officers all trying to key up their radio at the same time to give the update. That doesn't work. You end up with confusion. So it became one officer on the radio for the incident. Officers in other areas can chime in when it's appropriate for them to chime in. So you'll always have the 400 or 500 or 100. So there are 3 groups that would be in charge of keeping the log of the radio traffic and would also functionally act as dispatch. It depended on which area was available, whether it be 100, 200, 400, or 500. So that would be determined by the time that the incident was happening, which of those 4 would be the response. Typically, you'd chime in your name, your location, and it would be Officer Smuckatelli, B West 2100. And then 100, 200, 400, or 500 would respond saying, Officer so-and-so, 100, 200, 400, 500, to Officer so-and-so, please continue. Then it would continue the radio traffic. So you'd have the main hub that would be one of the people on the radio. And there would only be one person from main hub on the radio. You'd have the one person at the scene on the radio. And then typically you would have anyone that was being called to the scene would also be able to chime in. So if you needed A team would chime in and say A team en route. If you needed medical would chime in and say medical en route. Shit like that.
I'm reading through this, and this does not, show incongruence with the body cam footage I saw here. Things like the training includes defensive tactics, including de-escalation. No, it really didn't. Not for that.
I'm not
techniques.
Check the update date on those.
Yeah, I was about to say updates.
So after the $8 million that the city lost. Yeah, after the $8 million the city lost. Yeah. And the rest
after any
procedures,
incident like this, they'd update.
After big incidents,
these skills are.
But
yeah.
What you do is you have that because we had issues where too many people were tying up the lines when it came to incidents. We also had issues where too many officers were giving instructions and they were giving contradictory instructions. So this became the training in order to prevent that. And it became policy in order to prevent that. Because that was an issue where I worked before that training and before that policy came into place, I can see that being and just having been around people, I can see that as a very likely thing that would happen if it was not trained in that one person. So if they didn't have that one person training, then the fact that 3 people were giving contradictory orders, that becomes that would happen if there was no training to say one person, if there was no policy to say one person, I can absolutely see 3 people. So trying to go after them for that becomes they ideally would have known better, but I've seen way too many people fall into that to think that people will know better than to have multiple people jabbering, which is why in EMS, it's also a thing that when you show up to a scene, you make it clear that when you're trying to get information, you go, and you point out one person. You tell me this, and you make sure that no one else is trying to chatter to you. You get one person to tell you what you need to know. Because if you just ask, can someone tell me this? You'll either get every motherfucker in the room will answer, or no one will answer. So you pick out one person, you get them to answer. And when you assign a task, you pick out one person, you assign them that task. Because again, if you are showing up to incident as an EMT and you say, someone get me the AED, either you'll have 10 people all suddenly rush to get the AED, or you'll have not a single fucking soul move. So that is one of the things that I would say is something that I'd have to look at the training, I'd have to look at the policy to know how
and assuming Mesa County's policy was either malformed or
if they didn't have if they didn't have a
incapable.
policy on that, then I'd be going, that's what is fucking going to happen when there's no policy on that. If they had a policy where they said one person speaks and it was 3 motherfuckers speaking, then I'd be going, oh yeah, they fucked up and they should be gone after for their fuck up.
Though, due to the line of events, it appears that it was more a policy failure than failure from any one of the officers involved.
But you get where
and
I'm
as
coming
such,
from with that
Quiz
point,
did
right?
say the city had to pay out like $8 million, was it?
Yeah. Which also sounds like, it's probably a policy top down.
$8 million to the widow, and then $1.5 million to his parents.
Okay.
That sounds rather much like it was something that was determined to be a
complete and utter failure of the policy, ending in a tragedy for all involved.
Yeah. Like one of the examples.
Well, like I said, I think that the major thing, the reason why he was found not guilty was because the judge suppressed the body cam footage.
That is definitely going to be a factor.
That might have been part of it, but
and going off,
it's always
of that,
difficult to say that would have changed it. It might well have changed it. It might not have.
And going off of that, the judge might have said no to it because it may have unfairly prejudiced the jury. I've heard that term used.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, fair trial system, so...
Later that month, the officer in question had received several policy violations and unsatisfactory performance, which led to his termination from the police. With internal investigation revealing Brailsford had violated department weapon policy by engraving his patrol rifle with the phrases "You're fucked" and "Molan Lebe," which a Greek expression, "come and take it," associated with the American militia movement. Blah, blah, blah. Brailsford had also been previously investigated for body slamming a teenager during an arrest.
Oh, so we're dealing with a repeat offender, too.
Yep. So that makes it more likely that, yeah, he should have been gone after. Like I said, though, when I hear about a case, I have a hard time judging unless I know the policies and the training. Because, for instance, one of the recent cases where everyone went after them was the Chauvin knee. Problem is that the knee across the shoulder, as it was, and as it was shown in body cam, is something that was trained by the Minneapolis Police Department.
And then it was quickly scrubbed from all records, and the Minneapolis Police Department threw them under the bus as soon as they saw the backlash.
Yep. And that
sort of... The archive, everything now does that with police policy to make sure that never happens.
Yep. And that sort of shit pisses me off, because one of the things when it comes to anything use of force... Are you guys familiar with the reasonable person standard?
I'm well aware of the legal doctrine, yes.
So,
though getting into the weeds about it might be a little bit too deep in this circumstance.
A lot of things use the reasonable person standard. Use of force categorically does not use the reasonable person standard. It uses the reasonable professional standard. Have you ever heard the reasonable professional
This will be the third time you've went into it on stream. And that's third time with me. I'm well aware of it.
Okay. So just to make sure everyone knows, reasonable professional standard is if a professional would have done what you would have done in the same circumstance. If the average professional would have done what you would have done in that same circumstance. Just to phrase it a bit more clearly. So
this is a big part of why, for example, and I'm directly comparing it because your reasoning sounds exactly like NTSB investigators, why investigators at the NTSB are typically former pilots.
Yeah. Because there's shit that a pilot would do in a situation
that a normal man would think is completely insane.
Yep. But it's the right thing to do, and you know that by your training. So you use the reasonable professional. That is a fairly standard thing for use of force. So it drives me crazy when I see things that are being held to the reasonable person when they should be held to the reasonable professional. And it really pisses me off when I see something that's in training that someone's then being fucked for because they did what they were trained to do, but it ended poorly. So suddenly they're in the wrong, even though they did it exactly like they were told.
Yeah, but I think there's a little bit of a difference between this and the George Floyd case.
Oh, I'm not trying to say that they're one for one. I'm saying that that's an example of why I have trouble with a lot of when I hear something and I don't know the standards, I don't know the training. Because
and so there's
when I first saw the video of the Floyd, again, I'm not trying to make a one for one. I'm using it as an example of a point. When I first saw the video of the Floyd from the one angle where it did kind of look like the knee was on the neck, I went, okay, that looks like he fucked up a control position that I'm familiar with, which is the knee across the upper shoulder. So it looked like he had fucked that up, and I was going, okay, that is probably bad. I want to get more info on this before I decide. But that wasn't what most people did, because most people don't have the control tactics training.
Mm.
So they saw what looked to be a man with his knee on someone else's neck, and they went, that man's murdering someone.
And you see this a lot in circumstances that require the reasonable professional, because if a layman goes over, and I'm going back to pilots because it's just something I'm really interested in, the Tenerife disaster. Everyone, even non-aviation aficionados, should know Tenerife. 2 747s, on-ground collision, almost everyone dead. The single most disastrous aircraft incident on record by casualties. The layman would believe that the Dutch plane's pilots, due to Dutch policy, forced the Dutch planes to go super, super quickly, resulting in the crash.
Mm-hmm.
I've been rightfully banned for having that opinion by a Air Force pilot that's now in civilian control, Royal Air Force to be precise, saying that Tenerife was bad CRM on the part of both planes. The fact that the airfield was foggy as all hell, and it was actually a backup due to a unrelated terrorist incident in Portuguese islands off of Africa. I forget their name. But that's
it's beside the point.
Yeah. So it's the same situation you have to approach with cop situations. The layman's first gut reaction in situations where the professional standard is required is often missing a lot of context at best, or B, just not correct.
Yep.
I would also say, though, that, to a counterpoint, there's some things that you can look at and just say, well, that's not right.
There is a point. And typically when it reaches that point, Buddy's going to get roasted across the coals.
Well, like Boston cops throwing people into the back of squad vans and then just fucking hammering it down the streets of Boston. They call it the tin can technique.
Yeah,
even to a layman would sit there and say, that's pretty extreme. But to all the other cops who sit there, well, that's professional standards.
Well, no, that wasn't professional standards.
Well, every cop did it. That was the thin blue line protection there.
That was Boston issue, which is why professionals, the reasonable professional will often bring in a professional from outside. They'll give them the policy documents, and then after that person's reviewed the policy and training documents, they'll then say yes, no, maybe.
And another thing here real quick about
some separation.
Mr. Brailsford. In August 2018, Brailsford was reinstated by the police department, so he was fired and then reinstated, staying for a further 42 days in what the department described as a budget position. The department agreed to reimburse Brailsford for medical expenses related to his post-traumatic stress disorder as a result of the shooting of Daniel Shaver. Yeah, I would imagine that you'd feel guilty after murdering a man. And the resultant criminal trial. The reinstatement allowed Brailsford to apply for accidental disability experienced during the course of his work. As a result, Brailsford was unanimously approved to be retired on medical grounds. Brailsford is also given the pension of $2,500 per month. The fact that Brailsford was ultimately medically retired instead of remaining fired was the only revealed to the public on July 2019.
Yeah, like I said, it sounds like this is probably a case where he definitely fucked up, and fucked up big. Should have been punished. And
the cops are covering for him.
Yeah.
Potentially. But you
I
see,
mean, they took a $9.5 million loss to do so, but I see the thin blue line protecting him there.
But you see what I was saying with my reservations when it comes to issues.
I'm just saying, man, when I sit here and read all of this stuff and I saw the body cam footage, there was nothing that says to me that this was an error of procedure, that this was was
like
unlawful.
I said, there's certain parts of it that sounded like they are quite possibly an error of procedure. The 3 people giving contradictory directions. That, to me, sounds error of procedure. Other aspects do not sound like error of procedure. But that particular one did, because, like I said, if you don't have that built into your policy...
Well, I mean, I've seen tons of body cam footage of cops doing the right thing in situations that are way more dangerous, where they'll have one person covering with a rifle. That's fine. Cover someone with a rifle, yes. But as soon as you get them on the ground, which Daniel Shaver was, then why did none of them reach forward and handcuff him?
And
he had 3 dudes with rifles pointed at him.
Yep, like I said, there's certain parts that sound like it was absolutely they fucked up. There were some parts that sounded like it might be beyond they fucked up. And there's certain parts that I'm going, okay, that might be a policy issue.
And the policy issues being addressed is definitely important too. But I also think that people should be held accountable for their actions.
Which is what I said, that I think that the way that it should be done is if it's completely egregious, fuck them over a barrel. If it's something that is there within their training, within their policy, and to my mind, within their training is even more important, because you can have a policy that they've never actually been trained to do, at which point that policy isn't really a thing to my mind. It's just kind of fucked.
Well, I mean, in that case, then the police department itself should be held accountable.
Yeah, which is
what I'm saying. And it sounds like they did to the tune of $9.5 million.
Which is... But that's what I'm saying, that when it's those sorts of instances, that's the police department and the city or state, depending on what level of control and oversight is supposed to be there, that should be the ones that get dinged on that, not the individual officer that was doing the job as well as they could with the training that they had, but just couldn't do what was dictated.
I'm sorry, I have a more hardline stance for that, man. You sign that dotted line, you are held to the standard. You can't meet it, regardless of training. That's on you.
I get that you have that standard. I think that it is a cruel standard to hold, to be perfectly honest.
No, I'm perfectly cruel to the government. I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
Well, it's not being cruel to the government. It's being cruel to the individual. And
the individual is deciding to become an agent of the government. They're making that choice.
And I do believe that in court, Supreme Court, I should say, cases, police officers, once they make that vow, are edifices of the state, in fact.
Yeah.
Like I said,
I'm just saying that's my perspective. I know we're not going to agree, Sanguine, but I'm just saying that's
I'm just
my.
trying to make sure that my stance is clear, because it's been stated several times.
Like I said earlier, you've taken the very pragmatic, realist stance. However, Quiz has this civic stance, and I agree to a certain extent with both.
Yeah, I think that if there's a severe violation, then absolutely go after it.
Well, I mean, in terms of that too, I'm gonna be real with you, Sanguine. There's a lot that probably should have been gone after that just flat out didn't.
Oh yeah, I would admit that there's instances.
Line protectionism is a thing, yes.
Yeah, there's. I mean, fuck. There was was it Georgia where they massively dropped standards for police officers, allowing still on paper ex-cons to become police officers, and then they were gobsmacked when 5 on paper ex-cons beat a man to death.
Oh, was that what came out about that case?
It was, if I remember correctly, 5 on paper ex-cons that had been hired on, and they would not have been able to be police officers had those standards not been lowered. And yeah, they beat a man to death. In the street.
Mm-hmm. We're referring to something semi-recent, correct?
Yeah, it was from just a year or so ago at most.
I want to say more like 8-9 months. I'm recalling something like that from like March or May.
Yeah, that's what
April.
I'm saying. At most, it was a year. So it was probably less.
Yeah, that was an ugly situation.
Yeah. And so in terms of that kind of stuff too, I don't want it to be, misconstrued here. I'm not entirely anti-cop. I'm just saying that cops need to be held to a much higher standard because, there's a whole bunch, there's a whole bunch of like videos that donut operator posts where I sit there and say, no, that's absolutely lawful. Like the one I reacted to on Twitter once was there was a guy who was backing up and ramming the side or the passenger, driver's side door of the police squad car over and over and over again. And the cop, just rolls down the window and shoots him. I'm like, yeah, cars are more deadly than bullets. So yes, that was an attempt on the officer's life. Absolutely justified.
You and I are agreeing, just we have a slightly different view of how holding them to a higher standard works out. I say that we hold them to a higher standard from the
training, hiring, and whatnot perspective.
And maintaining of skills. And that is where we're best at holding them to a higher standard. And you're saying that we need to hold them to a higher standard regardless of that.
Yeah, and to be a little bit uncharitable, Quiz's view is from a punitive standpoint almost.
Well, but it's a punitive standing that doesn't look at those factors.
Now, if
which is why
Sanguine, you got your dream policy nationwide or with slight modifications because each community is different, of course.
Yep.
You'd fully agree that Quiz's idea that rake anyone who violates policy or those standards should be raked over the coals?
Oh, yeah. I just think that until such time as they have the ability to live up to that standard, holding them to it is...
holding them above what they should be reasonably expected to do, yes.
Yes. That would be an accurate way of saying it. Yeah, the regardless of those was not a chastisement. It was saying that it didn't really care when it came to the individual judgment what those were. So it was using the denotative rather than the connotative. But I just realized it's almost 1 a.m.
Oh, we've been going at it.
Yep. So shall we go around the horn for parting words?
Well, if that's what we're doing, fuck the government, fuck Susan.
It's not Susan anymore.
I don't give a shit. I'll still say fuck Susan.
Fuck Mel Susan now?
I'll take that as well.
You'd probably enjoy that more anyways.
Oh, shut up!
Okay, Inquisitor, you there? Interesting parting words. I'm always amazed at your ability to simulate. What was the name of that actor? The Police Academy guy.
I never watched Police Academy, but
I don't remember his name. Shit.
Yeah,
it's actually a pretty memorable name, but I don't remember it right now.
I knew you would know exactly who I'm talking about. But do you have any parting words, Inquisitor?
I'm just saying that civic duty is important, and it should not be so pithily disregarded in terms of your profession, and needs to be a part of what you want to do. You shouldn't be looking at going to being a cop, politician, or any of that kind of stuff for money. You should be looking at it as your civic duty to better your community. And if you don't look at it that way, I think you're a piece of shit, and you're doing a massive disservice to this country and to the citizens. And you can go fuck yourself.
I'd agree that you should go into that sort of thing with the intention of doing it for the right reasons.
The term is civil servant for a reason.
Yep, and that's why it always pisses me off whenever someone who's in politics says that, well, they can't talk to me like that. And I'm going, no. They can talk to you however the fuck they please. That's the point of you being in that position. They get to vent their spleen on you.
Mm-hmm. All right, before we start another conversation.
Yep. So I'll sign off with my standard of, if you're passionate about something, make sure that you devour it. Don't let it devour you. And with that, have a good night, all. The zoo is closed.
Good night, everyone.
Good night. And now I click this, and I wait a few moments because it always